Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. Kansas House Democratic leader Brandon Woodard is in the fight for affordability, for civil rights, for the future of his home state. He shared the trend lines in Kansas politics, the secrets to being a good caucus leader, and how he overcomes defeat and maintains hope in these challenging times. Enjoy. Kansas House Democratic leader Brandon Woodard, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about what's going on in politics in Kansas. How's the session going? You're making a big push towards affordability. How is it resonating both inside the Capitol's walls and outside?
Yeah, so it's been a whirlwind session. We just finished up week number 7 of 12, and so we just hit our turnaround break. So everything that had not passed out of the House just yet has died, and whatever didn't come out from the Senate has died. And so we're working through the only about 40 bills that the Senate sent us. None of them are really dealing with anything that the people of Kansas care about. So once again, while the Republicans expanded their supermajority by talking about affordability issues, they've chosen to focus only on culture war issues, like getting rid of trans people's driver's licenses rather than making it more affordable to live, work, or raise a family in Kansas. And so it's been a whirlwind. We're seeing what happens with the consequences of an election where Republicans pick up seats. Yet at the same time, even in the superminority, Democrats are helping control the message inside and outside of the state house. Us talking about those kitchen table issues, talking about lowering property taxes, making housing more affordable, looking at how we can make childcare more accessible and affordable, whether you're in the rural parts of the states or the urban part, which are both dealing with the same issue, are the housing shortage. We're coming with solutions rather than telling people the Republicans are bad, you shouldn't vote for them. We're saying, here's what we will offer to you, not only here as the superminority, but what we're asking you to support us with when it comes to November as well.
Yeah. Maybe give us a sense of the state of Kansas politics and the Democratic Party in Kansas, and maybe some trend lines that may be impacting your ability to shape that debate.
Yeah, so Kansas is a wild beast. We have been a beacon of centrist politics for decades until the Brownback administration before Governor Kelly, who came in and decimated both moderate Republicans, but the Democratic numbers of both the House and Senate as well. Because of that, we saw a tax experiment that shocked the nation that if you get rid of income taxes, the state goes bankrupt, and then you can't afford to pay your bills, your roads crumble, and your schools have to go to 4-day school weeks. And so Governor Kelly and our coalition has been able to restore our investment in public K-12, in higher education, and have our infrastructure plan that allows us to be back on track, to be very forward-thinking. That being said, the Republicans have continued to chip away at those moderate centrists that we've been able to work with. My first term 8 years ago, I was able to count on about 30 moderate Republicans on healthcare, on education, on stopping bad tax policy, and now we're really lucky if we can find 5 or 6 of those. And so because of that, we are at a place where we have a Democratic governor. So you have Republican supermajorities in the House and the Senate, a governor who is no nonsense and makes sure that the Republicans will have to do everything they can to overcome her veto. And yet at the same time, we have this momentum that we have not had since 2016, when the moderate Republicans flipped over 30 seats in the legislature in the August primaries. Democrats flipped 13 seats in the House and Senate. And that was the same year that Donald Trump won Kansas by almost 20 points. And so we are back at a place where we have a governor's race with an open seat. So we have a whole clown car of Republicans in their primary, but included in that is a reasonable centrist Republican. And so with that, we also have a constitutional amendment that they've placed on the August ballot that would change our Supreme Court from a merit-based system where it's fair and impartial and change those to elected partisan offices. And so because of that, Kansas has gotten very good at voting no on constitutional amendments. First, when we shocked the nation, even though none of us in Kansas were shocked, that Kansans don't want government controlling their lives or their access to reproductive health care, to fast forward to now where Kansans don't want us spending $100 million to elect partisan Supreme Court justices. We want our court to be focused on the rule of law and not just their next election. And so with that, we're going to have a lot of senators turning out in the Republican primary, as well as just generally voting in August. But we know that we are going to have a wave election with Democrats in November. We've got a handful of candidates who are community rooted, who are doing everything right, and who are just those people who fit the makeup of their district. And in Kansas in 2024, although we lost 3 seats, we had some of the closest races in the entire country. We lost a Senate seat by 31 votes out of 32,000. We lost several House seats by just 250 votes or less. And I think 9 seats, we need to flip 5 to break the supermajority, and 9 seats were decided by 750 votes or less. And so we are laser focused on talking about these kitchen table issues. We spent the entire summer and fall last year going to 14 cities across the state, all from the most eastern urban suburban areas to the most rural parts of Kansas, to talk to voters and Kansans about the issues they care about, whether it was liberal Kansas and western Kansas or Lenexa, where I'm at, in eastern Kansas. Everyone is focused on affordability. And so the political makeup is one of those where so much of our electoral outcomes come down to who comes out of the primary, because we have so many of these swingy purple districts that if a conservative wins a purple district, the Democrat almost always wins in the general election. And so I'm making predictions now that we're going to see a wave of Friends elected across the aisle in August, and we're going to see a really wave year in November with our House elections as well.
What do you hear from your Republican colleagues when you're up there and like, we got to increase affordability in our state, we got to reduce costs or increase wages, and then there's no significant legislation to reflect that? What's their response?
Yeah, I think you hear this from a lot of elected leaders, that one of the most frustrating parts for us is that there are so many people on the other side of the aisle that know what they are doing is wrong. They tell us quietly that they wish we weren't voting on this. We wish we were focused on real issues that help Kansans. And yet they're electing legislative leadership who are more interested, as they run for statewide office, in earning President Trump's endorsement by running as far right as they can. Meanwhile, they are focused on issues that, like we are, they want to make it more accessible for kids to go to school. Just this week, we worked the budget, and we only had a handful of Republicans work with us who are focused on affordability in their property tax bills, which the ultimate outcome of what came out this week was absolute garbage and something I couldn't vote for. But at the start of it, it was with the budget, we had the ability to invest $2.5 million, which would help 34,000 Kansas families to eliminate the copay for reduced lunch and just put them on free lunch. $2.5 million would help 34,000 families save over $130 a year. And yet their property tax bill last year gave the average family $30, which is barely enough to buy a pizza. And so we have allies on the other side. When we did work the budget this week, we had a number of different amendments to try to get our special education funding up to par. We have not constitutionally funded special education in over 20 years. And because of that, our schools aren't just not helping our students with special education needs. They're instead defunding athletic programs and defunding theater programs and different academic opportunities, when they should really be able to offer all those opportunities and also expect the state and the federal governments to make up for that 92% of excess cost. Each one of those amendments, as we dropped the threshold, even just to keep it flat, we picked up, I think, 18 Republican votes. And so while 18 out of 88 still isn't enough, we need 26 to match with us to get to that magic number of a majority. But even they are willing to break away from leadership because they know Kansans are hurting right now. And so if the Kansas Republican majority is not going to support the people of Kansas, we're going to make it very clear and hold them accountable for, one, their votes, but two, to make sure the people of Kansas know we are the ones fighting for you. And regardless of whether we're a Democrat or a Republican, the only thing that should matter to you is, are we willing to look out for you and your family and how to make it more affordable for you? If that person is willing to do so, they should earn your vote.
What's the role of the Democratic leader in all this? I mean, I think people understand that they elect a representative. That representative goes and votes on statewide issues, but through the prism of their own district and their constituents. When you become a leader of a caucus, that some of those calculations may need to change in order to get good results for the state. How do you work with your own colleagues, and then how do you work with your Republican colleagues in this new role?
Yeah, I think in the time I've been involved in Kansas politics, and this is my 8th year in Topeka and my second session as the minority leader or Democratic leader, I've watched each individual govern in a different way. I was involved in politics before that, and so I saw a couple of minority leaders while we were under a Republican administration. And I think if you're in a system where you have a Republican supermajority and a Republican governor, what we've seen is you have no ability pretty much to impact most policies. They might need your vote on a committee bill to get it out of committee, but then they're going to do whatever they need to on the floor. I knew that in Governor Kelly's last 2 years, her 8-year term, that while we lost seats and we're dealing with an expanded supermajority, that we needed a leader that can not only unite the 37 Democrats in our caucus, but also that can work with some of the folks in the 88 on the other side. And so I think when you become leader, you're kind of pulled into multiple directions. You've got the progressive wing of my party who wants to make sure that we are holding people accountable and fighting for all the issues, rightfully so. While you also have this more seasoned kind of centrist portion of our caucus, as well as these traditional Republicans who, you've got the vulnerable Republicans in areas where they're looking over their shoulder because they don't want to lose their election in 2026. Yet you also have these people who are willing to stand up for what's right and are just incredibly principled. And so my job as leader is to find the people. If it's a veto override, I only need to find 5 Republicans out of 88 to vote with us to sustain the governor's veto. When we're passing policy, even just this week, there were a couple of bills that we looked at that they said, unless we have Democratic votes, we cannot pass this. And so that gets us to the negotiating table to say, we can get you these 10 or 12 votes you need, but we need to see A, B, and C in the bill. And if not, we're walking away. And so I think so much of what we do in Kansas has always been coalition-based. And when I came in, we had a governing majority between Democrats and moderate Republicans. The conservatives still had the speaker gavel, but we had the votes to go say, let us pass this bill or we're going to oust you. And so I think it's a lot of being strategic. It's a lot of time management. And it's a lot of personnel issues as well. We had 2 people out this week that were in the hospital. You're calling them to check in with them to make sure they're okay. We're working with my very small but amazing staff to make sure that all of our committee spots are covered, and just doing what we can to not outsmart, because we're already smarter than the 88 in the majority, but to use the procedures and the rules in a way that's effective. We had a really bad culture war bill that we were fighting against. And I had a number of friends texting me saying, I can't believe they're holding you guys on the floor for 6.5 hours. And I was like, no, we're holding them. We're going to make them hear us. We're going to build the court cases argument through this bill because we know they're going to be able to pass it. So I think a lot of that is working with each of my members, finding really amazing community-rooted folks that can be really incredible candidates in the districts that we can win, and also traveling to the parts of the state where we might not be able to win in 2 or 4 or 6 years, but as continued population changes happen, we want them to know that we care about them, we're investing in them, and that the path to the majority in the next 10 years or less is going to go through those parts where we don't represent right now, but we can do the things that we need to and build the infrastructure to make it possible for us to get back to the speaker's gavel that we've not had since truly the year I was born.
Wow. I think people don't quite realize that all these candidates, you campaign as an individual, and then the moment you get elected, it's all very much a team sport, and you have to understand both your colleagues, but then also their districts and the people they represent. Can you talk about what you've learned from traveling around the state and engaging with your colleagues and recruiting candidates and all the things you have to do as the Democratic leader?
Yeah, I got into this thinking I was running for one term to flip a seat that was Republican for 40 years to help fully fund schools and reinvest in higher ed and go back to living my life. And 8 years later, I'm the Democratic leader, and I'm asking people to step up and do this really scary thing I did 8 years ago. And oftentimes asking people to do it in districts that were even tougher than mine. I think what I've learned is we all care about Kansas being a really incredible state, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. It's the tougher part is that we're continuing to see the political division that we see in Washington, D.C. start to infect our state legislative chambers. But as someone who's proud of the fact that I'm incredibly respected by the people on the other side of the aisle, in addition to my caucus, or I wouldn't be leader, I like that I can go to different parts of the state. While I've been a city boy my whole life, I spent every summer on my aunt's farm in central Kansas. And as a new member of the agricultural committee, I told them this year, I was like, look, I spent every summer on my aunt's farm, but I was the pool boy. So, and I fed the cats. So I'm excited to learn what we can do. And I think going with that mentality of just acknowledging where you're coming from and saying, I'm not going to tell you how to campaign here. I'm not going to tell you what you should be talking about, because if I would have told my constituents my first race what they should care about, I wouldn't have flipped a seat. I listened to them, I heard them, and I reflected those messages back to them. And so I think that in a district like mine, where it is still Republican heavy, but I can talk to my Republicans here about the access to reproductive rights and how we need firearm safety legislation. In Dodge City, we have to talk to people about how their firearms are tools on their farm, and how making healthcare decisions should be between them and their healthcare provider and not the government. And so I think it's really just learning from them on the ground how we can best support and empower the work that they're doing. And in some of these seats that are not competitive yet for us, it's truly mind-blowing that we're going because we care. We want to build our support. We want to build our lists. And if someone's giving $5 or they're knocking a door for our candidate who probably can't win a seat that we're in for 2 or 4 more cycles, like the number of people who have just said, it means the world to us that you came to visit with us, you wanted to listen and learn from us, and you want to empower the work that we're doing. And, I thought of it, not that it was like this crazy concept. It's just our caucus, I've watched some of our members just get so ingrained in their district, and that's their job. And yet they get so ingrained in their district that they get so frustrated that people vote differently than them when they're in the state house. And so when we go to other parts of the state, we get to learn from the people of like, hey, this is truly them voting their district. And here are ways that we can maybe find some common ground where maybe we're not going to compete in that district, but we can, instead of losing by 30%, we can close that gap to 10 or 15% and really show people who, because right now Democrats are being defined by broadcast media and radio news. And if we're not in an area where they're represented by a Democrat, we're being defined because we're not showing up. And truly, we kicked off this tour across the state because our junior senator walked out of a town hall and said that they were paid Democratic plants that were just Republican farmers from Kansas showing up to ask him why he wasn't standing up to the president on tariffs and trade issues, because it was killing and hurting their farms. And he walked out. So I was like, if Republican elected officials are too afraid to go talk to Western Republican conservatives, I'll go listen to them. I grew up in a Republican household. I can not quite speak Republican, but I can understand where people are coming from and find ways that we can agree.
You mentioned you just ran to flip the seat and serve one term. What was your path to public service? How'd you get involved in politics?
That's a good question. My journey is probably a little more traditional, and yet I say that as someone who ran for office when I was 27 years old. And so I cared a lot about these things. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas. I was coming of age and coming to discover who I was as a gay person at the same time that the Kansas legislature was debating a marriage equality bill, whether to ban same-sex marriage in Kansas or not in 2004 and 2005. And I grew fascinated by this group that the news called the Kitty Caucus. So there was this group of Democrats and young moderate Republicans who blocked the ban on same-sex marriage in 2004. And I think growing up in a Republican household that was probably more socially conservative, when before that it really became the movement of the Republican Party, I listened to people that I really cared about talk about, why would we ever do this? Or in the same time, you had some libertarianism streaks of being like, why does the government care? Like, just let people be who they are. And then 2005, it ultimately passed, and the voters overwhelmingly put into our Kansas Constitution that I have to swear an oath to, that bans same-sex marriage. And so I started getting interested then. My first election that I was able to vote in, I was turned 18 in 2008. So I showed up to caucus at my high school, and it was me and a small group of grandmas in the Hillary corner and this wave of people in the Barack Obama corner. And I was like, what is going on and what do I need to know? And I was one of those caucus goers that the caucus captains love so much because they can convince you to move to the other side of the room. And I just got so inspired about Barack Obama's message about hope and change. And growing up in Kansas politics, where at the time we had a Democratic governor, we had centrist things. I had people that were just they just got along politically no matter what. Fast forward, I got really involved in working a bunch of jobs in high school and then in college, and then ultimately kind of burned out and talked to my advisor. And I was like, look, I don't like college. I'm working 3 jobs. I can't, this isn't sustainable. And she was just like, you need to get involved in something on campus. And so I took that and probably 3 quad shots apparently, because I got involved in everything on campus, and kind of found a passion area when it came to student government. I wasn't involved as a senator until my junior year. I think I ran for student senate, and immediately got appointed to cabinet. And then fast forward to my senior year, I'm student body vice president, overseeing a $24 million budget, digging into how all of our fee structure works, and yet advocating in the state house because the Kansas legislature was considering putting firearms on college campuses. And we were in such a budget crisis because of the Brownback failed tax plan that tuition went up by 8.5% that year. And so I was advocating in Topeka and united this coalition of, I got not only the university presidents and the chancellor of KU, all the public safety offices, the faculty senates, and the student senates, all to unanimously oppose this local control issue. And yet Democrats and Republicans voted for it. And I was like, I am going to run against one of these people someday, half joking. Then when I moved to Lenexa, where I'm at now after college, it was ahead of the 2016 election. I got involved in Hillary's campaign. I was the caucus captain for my local Senate district. I worked on a campaign for state Senate that year after knocking on doors and helping in volunteer official capacity on campaigns forever, swearing I would never truly be the one that ran, but I would go help people do it. And then in 2016, my district, we had a candidate drop out and still almost win. And later I became the chair of the Johnson County Young Democrats, which is of the 105 counties, is the largest county in Kansas. We're 20% of the state's population. Donald Trump got elected. Folks were out protesting, and I was excited to see this movement. And yet, as I started looking people up, I was like, you're posting about how angry or upset you are, but you don't vote. You didn't vote in the presidential. You don't know who your city councilor is. And so we restarted the Johnson County Young Democrats the night before that Donald Trump was inaugurated as president in his first term. We set up 20 chairs, hoping 10 people would show up, and 200 plus people walked into the room. And that's when we knew there was this momentum and movement. So what started as a group of 6 of us that were campaign volunteers that were something's going on. We've got to do something. We got to channel people's energy from this protest into action. And we ran 6 people we wanted to get 6 young Democrats elected to local school board and city council that year. And we ran 7, and all 7 of them won. Fast forward that group, in 2018, I ran in a competitive Democratic primary and then a very competitive general election after trying to recruit this group of different PTA moms in my district. They all said no for 6 months. I told my friends I was never going to do it. And yet then I go to a coffee shop, that group of moms who were like, oh my gosh, Brandon, we found a candidate. I was like, awesome. Who is it? And they were like, you. So the rest is history. You know,
you can't fight PTA moms. You're not going to win that argument.
You got to go with them. So grabbed a clipboard and knocked a bunch of doors. Barely held on in 2020, being one of the top targets. So the Republicans really wanted this seat back. And I've been very lucky to be unopposed the last 2 cycles.
Wow. Amazing. What gives you hope? I mean, it feels like the country was making so much progress on gay rights. There were opportunities for bipartisan efforts at the state level, even in places like Kansas. And it feels like we're slipping backwards in these key areas that you've dedicated your life to. What keeps you showing up and fighting and in the game?
That's a really good question and a tough one. I think whenever I'm feeling down or whenever I've had a defeat, I go back and watch Hillary Clinton's concession speech in 2016. Specifically, her message to young people saying that fighting for what's right is always going to be worth it. But I also look back at my own personal journey. Like, I was student body vice president and was student body president the next year and was defeated overwhelmingly. And that sort of defeat makes you want to take your toys and go home and be like, well, that was the thing. I'm never doing that again. And then I ran for county party chair, and out of like 300 votes as a nobody in 2016, I lost by 12. I could have walked away, but instead focused on JOCO Young Dems and ultimately became the vice chair of the county party. I ran for minority leader 2 years ago, and I lost by 1 vote. And again, I could have packed my things, said this was a great journey. I've done my time, I'm handing the baton, but I picked myself back up and said, I'm going to get to work, and then was elected leader. And so I think whenever I'm feeling down, I know that so many people, reaction after something like 2024 or the defeat in 2016 makes us want to go and hide and feel like we've done our part and we tried and we're moving on. But we truly cannot give up. That's what they want us to do. And so I think what gives me hope, and especially why I love New Deal so much, is that getting to hear from people or just be in the room or be a part of a cohort of the Pete Buttigieg's and Stacey Abrams and Mallory McMorrow's, and even in Kansas, the Paul Davises who ran for governor and ran for Congress and now is like a very successful advocate in the state house. We're just surrounded by these true badasses who are able to, I think, realize that we are all individual humans, and yet when we have a platform that can inspire people, we have to use it. And so I get a lot of inspiration from the people around me and the leaders that I get to call myself a part of a cohort with. And also, especially being part of the Victory Fund, Victory Institute network, being one of I think we're up to like 1,300 LGBT leaders across the country. Just being able to know that none of this is like us doing any of this alone. We have people rooting for us. And any job in elected office, you've got so many more people that are rooting you on than the people that are trolling you online and sending you angry emails and things like that. And so I'm inspired by hope, while also knowing that like the political reality and the cultural reality for so many people right now is that things are really scary. And if you can't jump out on the front line with us right now, then help us behind the scenes, because we want to fight this battle. We want you to be a part of it. And none of us can do this.
I appreciate that. I love that. Maybe we'll change the name of the podcast to an honorable badass, honorable badasses. And I also want to acknowledge, right? Like, I think so many of us, whether they're in politics or out, it's always like a narrative of nothing but success. But the reality is, for the people doing the hardest things, it's success and failure, and building off of both. And so that journey for all the people who are interested in maybe running out there, especially running in places where there may be red states or red seats, I think it's really valuable for people to hear that part of it's just about persistence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's why we love having you in the New Deal Network. That's why we love following you and encouraging your efforts in Kansas. And I just want to thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Happy to be here and truly honored to be part of the New Deal Network.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,